more freedom for yourself. So I told you I had a lot to cover on that. I hope you enjoyed that. And now we're going to move over to part 2 of Bitcoin Hard Talk, episode 105, This Week in Macro. And the main overarching theme of what I want to cover is artificial intelligence and how AI is reshaping the job market and the economy, and make sure that we understand what is happening right in front of us, because we have more data than ever. Just going to give myself more water. Do me a favor, like, retweet, share, add a comment, help me get the algorithms moving. It is really working. We're getting more people watching these videos than ever. The numbers are up, the subscribers are up, but it's 100% organic. We're not getting traffic from the algorithms. We're getting traffic from you. So I really appreciate that. Okay, on the macro side, you all know my view. We are in a uniparty. Trump is not taking on the deep state. The deep state is the construct that props up the dollar and the debt-based Ponzi. So any taking on of the deep state weakens the dollar in order to create capital outflows and move the world to multipolarity. Tariffs do the same. It resets every relationship, drives people closer to China, allows the proof of weapons network and the financial industrial complex to acquire companies that are export dependent, consolidate them up and consolidate power, and have a hidden tax on the importer. And the importer is the US, because the US is increasing its debt. It's not reducing its debt. It has to have a trade deficit as well as a fiscal deficit, which means it needs to import more than it exports, and it needs to spend more than it takes in tax in order to maintain world reserve currency. But that is being hedged out, as we are seeing. Now, the currency, the DXY, had a bit of a pump above $100 again, and has now corrected back down sharply, while the long-term cost, the long-term 10-year and 30-year bonds, had a spike up again after a bit of a correction, and we had a weakening of the dollar again. That's a classic play, and that is due to job data as well. But the destabilization campaign to make America shrink into a regional power through tariff policy, Trump is doing everything that the financial industrial complex would want him to do, that he was paid to do. But obviously it gives you a MAGA narrative to make you think that this is, if you get that, you know, the construct of propping up the dollar that he's taken away are all the things that is why you need to protect yourself from the dollar. And so we follow the money and go past the narrative and understand that. But various things are being used. So the tariffs, you know, the government shutdown is a major source of destabilization at the moment. What is the government shutdown? The government shutdown means we've hit a debt ceiling, $38 trillion. Now, because we're increasing the debt and pretending that we're suddenly going to start paying down on debt, which can't happen, you can only increase the debt ceiling. So the Trump administration said another $5 trillion for the financial industrial complex, but we need the long-term rates to have higher rates, higher interest, and the short-term rates to be subsidized in order to roll over the debt. And we will take our long-term bonds and replace them with bills and shorter-term dated treasuries. And we want to manipulate the price down so that your pension gets a smaller interest while we pump them all into your pension and your stable coin, and you subsidize the devaluation of the debt, which creates lots of inflation. And we need deflationary tools like artificial intelligence. What does that do? Takes away jobs. And so you can see how this incestuous system of the debt-based Ponzi scheme is being strategically weakened. So when you hit the new debt ceiling, you then need a big, beautiful bill to get all the crony capitalism. The average American that doesn't own assets pays the bill through inflation, and their debt is propping up the consumption industrial complex by making you borrow at 30% interest on credit cards, payday loans at 40%, auto loans so you don't own your car, mortgages so you don't own your house, food that's borrowed on pay as you go, and payment systems and everything that's subscription services. That's the consumption industrial complex, where you end up with the debt, but you don't get the productive assets. You get consumption products, which puts you in a worse position, while those that own the assets, they can borrow at 0% through quantitative easing, and they get to leverage that 30% interest that you pay by borrowing at 0% through financial weapons of mass destruction and the banking system by mining fiat currency every time they issue a loan. Now, what does the government shutdown do? Well, this is just the left and the right that are all paid for by the same lobbies, by the proof of weapons network that controls both sides of the political rhetoric. And they say, hey, you lefties, pretend that you're helping the people and give them some more benefits. And who's going to manage those benefits? The financial industrial complex. Now, on the other side, the Republicans, they say, no, we're going to invest that money into artificial intelligence data centers in order to win the AI race. And who's going to receive that money? The technical industrial complex. And who's going to buy that bond and debt? On the long term, they'll receive the higher rates because they've got the 30-year and 10-year treasuries. They'll receive the higher rates and all the yield and the interest. But everyone else will pay the shorter term rate, which is being manipulated down via the Federal Reserve System. It's massive wealth transfer up to the proof of weapons network. So the right say we're going to spend it on military, we're going to create the War Department, we're going to make America, we're going to make sure that it goes to Palantir so that we have a stock price that outperforms everything based upon you investing in your surveillance state. And you basically end up paying for your demise and get the subsidized yield at the shorter term rate. And the government shutdown is simply the proof of weapons network that controls both sides arguing over where the money goes. You might get some benefits in inflation, but the financial industrial complex will manage it. You might be fooled into thinking that they're making the government smaller, while you get crony capitalism and socialism for large corporations, while you may own some assets. And so you're in the 1% and you're basically screwing over all the others on the wrong side of the Ponzi. And this is the economy of the K-shaped economy. And so the government shutdown, you can use it for two reasons. You can leverage your negotiations between your Congress and Senate, but you can also weaken and reset to the multipolar world order, which is what we're seeing right now. And so this is the longest government shutdown we've ever seen. Seems like a proof of weapons network operation to me, but now the government can't pay their staff. And so those that are traveling to America or away from America or within America are like COVID. They're getting their whole supply chain disrupted as this gets worse and worse. The travel staff, they need to continue working because airplanes need to fly, but they're not getting paid and they can't be getting paid. And so travel will be disrupted. There are delays, and then that impacts the economy. And we have all of these trickle down effects. The longer this goes on for. And so it is a good tool for bribing the politicians you paid for to get the money over to you to prop up the network. And you have socialism for the rich and socialism for those that own the assets. And then you call it capitalism. And what do the people do? The people do, no, we don't want communism. We don't want socialism. Don't give the money to me. Give it to them instead. And so you're going to print the money anyway, because this is how the dollar works. But people have been indoctrinated. So Mandani comes in and they're like, we got a communist. Please don't give them better bus rates. Please don't give them any of that stuff, because you're going to print the money anyway. But instead of it going to socialism for the corporations, you're arguing away socialism for the people that actually might be able to get free buses and various other things. Both are the same thing. One goes to the people and help the people that are shafted. The other goes to the corporations and makes you think that you got capitalism when you're arguing for a complete socialism of the wealthy as well. So that's the psyop. The model doesn't work. It's not capitalism. It's not communism. It's not socialism. It's just capture by the proof of weapons network in a debt-based Ponzi scheme that redistributes wealth away from those that are paying the highest interest over to those that get the lowest interest, that control the proof of weapons network via the financial industrial complex. So What is happening during this government shutdown? Well, now, remember, the Treasury, i.e. the government, has a bank account with the Federal Reserve. And they have an account called TGA. It's a Treasury General Account. Now, they can't pay any of their wages because they're in lockdown. So the Treasury General Account has now got $1 trillion because they loaded up prior to the government shutdown. And no one's getting paid. And so the money is stuck there. But that means that liquidity is not getting to the banking system. And so this creates a bit of a liquidity freeze, and you don't get the debt-based Ponzi scheme rolling over. So we're starting to see that there's a bit of a credit squeeze, and the reserves by the private banks, the shareholders of the Federal Reserve, has gone down from $3.2 trillion down to about $2.8 trillion as a result of that. And so we're getting a correction in the market. And then the Fed announced we're going to do reduced quantitative tightening. And then they make it sound like they're going to be going to lower those rates. And so they're setting up for a ginormous pump and dump. People are going to sell their assets. And then we're going to get closer to quantitative easing. We'll get the end of the government shutdown once the proof of weapons network has extorted whatever side of this is going from you. And it's going to pump the hell out of the assets, which is going to make the rich richer, the poor poorer that owns those assets. And the lobbies are going to squeeze all the politicians as much as possible. And this creates an environment of corrections in the market. But who's negotiating these deals? Well, the finance houses on the other side, they know what's going to happen. So they're hedging, using their hedge funds, squeezing more money as they use their hedge funds in order to create these financial products as well. And so, it will resolve itself, but you get the whole story that they can say. Trump can say it's the Democrats. The Democrats can say we're looking after the people. The Republicans can say we're not doing communism, we're not doing socialism. But all of them are just squeezing the Americans and handing it over to the wealthy class, which is creating this populist movement where those shafted by the system are voting in Democrat socialists in New York, i.e. Mandani. And who is Mandani? He can fuel all the religious tensions. And we'll cover more about that in the geopolitical section, which is a theme that I want to eventually return to. In the whole, is Trump looking after the Christians, saving the Christians in Nigeria? We'll be covering more about that and follow the money so that you don't need to fall for the bullshit. And again, I know people call me Trump derangement syndrome. I'll do the same analysis on Biden. It's a uniparty system. It doesn't matter. It's the same thing. It's just a different flavor. So the U.S. Congressional Budget Office basically is believed to have been hacked by a foreign actor. So guess who they're going to blame? It's China. It's the Russians. It's Iran. So that it can persuade you that you need to usher in a surveillance state in order to send more money to Palantir so that you can sign away your constitutional rights and you get the Patriot Act 2.0, which is why they're creating religious and racial tensions all across the West at the moment. And so the Washington Post is releasing new hacks as well to scare the shit out of the American people. And at the same time, we got the data on layoffs. Now, the layoffs had its record month this month. And obviously that led to a correction in the market as well. But the companies are caning it. The new, the Magnificent Seven are laying off, but they're getting more and more capital as well because they're being vassalized further and further and further as well. So what I think we're getting towards here is essentially Trump needs the ultimate blame shift. And so he can use these destabilization campaigns, i.e. the court saying you can't do tariffs, so that he's got his get out of jail free and opt out so he can blame the court. Or rather than say what's happening, he gets to say it's the Democrats because they did the government shutdown. But in the end, it allows for the narrative transfer to fool the Americans into thinking this is about making America great again. But what is really happening? Massive mergers and acquisitions. This is consolidation and concentration to the proof of weapons network now that the government is subordinate to them. And we're getting more and more of those announcements. Warner Brothers is looking to be acquired by David Ellison, the son of Larry Ellison, or it's going to be Netflix. And so those important nodes, you're noticing a lot happening with Larry Ellison and Oracle. And he's been allowed through his 40% pump in share price to take over Elon Musk as the wealthiest person. And he seems to be getting all of these M&A deals. That represents some of the TikTok US deal that's happening that we've covered in previous stuff as well. Now, the Fed also had to inject another $24 billion into banks as a result of this. And so who wins in the end? You get to inject liquidity. You get to move from quantitative tightening to quantitative easing, which is how the banks get their 0% interest, and the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And now there is a total of $125 billion that has been injected into the banking liquidity just in the last 5 days alone. And so that's showing some of these strains that are happening right now. At the same time as the Fed announcing that it's going to be pivoting into balance sheet expansion slowly, saying we're not doing quantitative tightening, we're slowly moving over to QE. And employment is going to be the reason, as we've said, because it's got that dual mandate. So where is the debt situation as it currently stands? So America is in a debt ceiling at approximately $38 trillion and can't make any of its payments until they get to roll over the debt and get more money extorted out of the American people. What is the American people's situation at the moment? Well, $18.6 trillion is the current household debt. That is $18.6 trillion that the banks mined and receive interest on. $13.1 trillion is the mortgages. So that's your lifetime enslavement, mining fiat currency to pay the interest on the debt that the bank got to create in the first place because they create the digital dollar every time they issue you a mortgage. $1.7 trillion has been mined in auto loans. So you don't own your car, you loan nothing and be happy. You loan the debt and all your income goes to paying off the debt for the proof of weapons network. $1.7 trillion is the student loans. So get the students, get them their credit cards, get them their mortgages, get them all of this debt on top of debt, get them all the household debt to supplement their income. And suddenly they can't have children. More and more people need to work, and you get the unproductive state that the West is in right now. That creates civil unrest. So all you need is to fuel through immigration, some racial tensions and various other things, and you can use that as a destabilization campaign. What about credit cards? $1.2 trillion in credit card debt across America. The banks created every single cent of that just by having a banking license, as they mine some more digital currency by you borrowing it into existence. And if you've got any wealth, if you manage to use Bitcoin to escape the cycle, they want you to own it in custody, borrow against it, so they can turn you into a collateralized Bitcoin obligation and roll you up into a margin call and take your Bitcoin as well. We had announcements from Challenger, Gray, and on Christmas report, and they said we've had the highest layoffs for October in 22 years. So 2003. And this was massive layoffs. It's like, remember what I covered last week? They've been saving them, implementing the artificial intelligence and robotics, and then they're going to roll it out to all the others as well. So that lays out the model. So far, there was over 1 million layoffs that have been automated for this year alone. So that's this made it into basically a major low. Normally low, higher, low, fire is normally the labor market. But we're seeing those layoffs, and I think they're due to artificial intelligence. We don't know, but they gave their reasons. And so you can either believe the data or not. But they said the reasons of what they're automating, the largest reason was automation. I think one of them was also Doge, the government jobs. So the government's laying off through automation and artificial intelligence. But also at the corporate level, warehousing is being automated, i.e., they are building robotics in order to automate, to remove staff so that they can function in an environment where they have to pay these tariffs and additional taxes on the small business, and the large business is also doing that as well. The second thing that the largest amount of layoffs was from technology companies. So technology companies are leading the layoffs, and at the same time, Nvidia became a $5 trillion market capitalization. And the Magnificent Seven are eating all the stocks, making it look like the stock market is reaching all new all-time highs, which it is, but it is concentrated in these major technical giants, which are hiring through H-1B visas Indians to build the artificial intelligence. They're automating warehouse and technology, and they're laying off their staff. This is what they call rebuilding the manufacturing base. This is what they're dealing with. That is how they're going to tackle the inflation, from rolling over the debt to devalue the government debt and try and combat it with some deflation, which is layoffs. That all points to universal basic income, stablecoin rolling over of debt, and radical shifts at the end of a debt cycle. And why do you think BlackRock is engineering this multipolar world? It's looking for higher returns elsewhere. And it is hedging and weaponizing the dollar and scraping and asset stripping the economy for everything it can, while the Gulf countries and various other foreign countries are investing $17 trillion, which pushes out the returns through foreign direct investment and pushes those capital flows where they can buy influence over vast American assets. And so the reason for the layoffs that they attribute, the first one, the biggest reason they gave was cost cutting. And the second reason, the largest reason, was artificial intelligence that they gave. Which were the okay, so those are the trends, and these are really starting to show up in the data. Now, maybe these are anomalies, but to me, everything's looking to this fiscal dominance strategy that we've been warning people about in the macro sections. Right, what else did we have? A few more interesting points. What is the other source of deflation? Energy costs. And so if you can get oil prices down, then you can have deflationary forces, because all of the inputs, the trucker industry, all of those different, they require energy. And if you can get those energy down, it trickles on down across all the producer pricing as well. So what is it that they were saying? We had a massive global energy conference in, I think it was Abu Dhabi this week. I think they had like 70,000 attendees across the industry. What were the major forms? I don't want to go through everything, but what the major messages that were coming from that as well is that there is no energy substitution. What that means is they're not taking out oil and gas and replacing it with renewable energy. There is just energy additions. So they're using, China's building all of its renewable energy, all of its different energy sources, and using that on top of oil and gas. And so we're getting just this massive demand for energy. And where is that massive demand coming from? Artificial intelligence was the main theme. And so all of these data centers, and that's why we're getting all of these resets and geopolitical trends that I'll be discussing as well, because more and more energy companies are now merging with artificial intelligence companies. So Microsoft, as I said, in the Bitcoin section, is partnering with Iron, which has, the ability to, it has data centers, and Microsoft gets chipped, and they can combine Bitcoin mining and artificial intelligence, which is an expensive, very different operation to build. What else did we see? We saw Abu Dhabi and Microsoft partnering as well. So they're building across those data centers across the Middle East that requires the energy. And now the tech companies and the financial industrial complex don't need America. They need cheap energy, and they need it to be hosted across the Middle East with labor from the global south, because Africans are still having babies Everyone else, the birth rates are going right down. The Muslim countries have the energy. Then you have this global south, GCC, and who's the customer that's buying it? Who has the most amount of oil that they're purchasing? And who's buying the most amount of gas? And who's investing in all the renewable and actually using it? Is China. And so America is just being asset stripped, shrunk into a regional power, while all of its technology is being sold off, and we're getting these global trends. So who really rules the equation? Well, I think we could say we are in an artificial intelligence bubble in terms of valuations. Now, it is going to change everything, but what's their business model? It's being subsidized by massive government contracts, and OpenAI has essentially become the too big to fail company alongside NVIDIA and all the Magnificent Seven. So if we're in a bubble with these tech companies, what types of deals are we seeing done? So OpenAI is committing to massive contracts, and those contracts are increasing the stock market valuations. And then based upon that, they're borrowing against those stocks. And now we're moving into a quantitative easing environment where the Fed might start buying those balance sheets based upon that cheap credit. We are building the 2008 financial crisis environment through financial weapons of mass destruction, backed up by an artificial intelligence bubble where it will be like the dot-com boom and bust likely in the end. And those valuations are going through the roof, waiting for their stimulus checks and socialism for the large companies. So what does OpenAI announce? It has signed a $38 billion hosting deal with Amazon, i.e. Amazon's going to be hosting the servers. OpenAI has basically now signed, let's go through the deals that they've announced, a $500 billion strategic, what's that? Oh, right, a deal with Stargate. Stargate was Big Beautiful Bill, government subsidy. So they get $500 billion from the government for Stargate. They've signed a $100 billion NVIDIA deal. They've signed a $100 billion AMD deal. So you've got the data centers, you got the chips, you got the government paying for it, socialism for the stock market. You've got a $38 billion deal signed with Amazon on top of the deal that we just discussed. You've signed a $25 billion deal with Intel as the government acquires its position in Intel, use the CHIPS Act to try and build those chips, and uses robotics and automation through OpenAI and artificial intelligence. So this ain't going to bring jobs back to America. This ain't going the way you're being sold. You need to hedge for this. They've also signed a $20 billion with TSMC, which is the Taiwan semiconductor manufacturing company. And some of those deals is going to lead to building their manufacturing base for older chips in America. And obviously, you've got the trade war and the sanctions around the Taiwan chips, while China builds its chips, and they are dependent upon China for the rare earths. The rare earths come from partnerships with building Africa and the global south and acquiring oil from Iran, Saudi, the GCC, and various other things. And so they've also signed a $13 billion deal with Microsoft. So this is basically pumping around these contracts that are being subsidized by socialism for the large corporation, while everyone's complaining that are destroyed by debt, that we don't want communism from Mandani because he might give something to us, the people, rather than to the corporation. This is the psyop that people have signed up for, because America's not capitalist. It's just not capitalist. This is following essentially the China model, but the China model is different. What's the China model? The China model is that they have a state banking system. And so they don't privatize the profits from money creation over to the banks, where the banks become bigger than the government and then they extract all the money. They keep it as a state banking system, which has community banks in order to redistribute that money into the community. So you may complain about the size of the government, but at least they reinvest everything into a productive, and they get it wrong, of course. It's a big operation, but at least it comes back to the people, which is why all the Chinese people own their real estate. And any type of financial crisis isn't a debt crisis. It's a savings crisis
because they had a large portion of their savings in real estate, and that real estate's correcting, but they've still got all their savings because the vast majority of Chinese people have savings and own their property as well. We're told that's communism. When most people in America, they're enslaved, they don't own their property, they own an IOU from a bank and give all their income to the privatized banks that create the dollar. And then the banks are too big to fail, so they socialize the losses and privatize the gains. Smell a psyop? Communism, capitalism, socialism, none of them are real. Like, it's just a psyop as well. OpenAI have also signed a $10 billion deal with Oracle. So the circle jerk around all the different companies as well, it continues. And they just signed a multi-billion-dollar deal with Broadcom as well. So the Magnificent Seven stocks and all the others as well. They launched a new browser to compete with Chrome. And they became the world's most valuable private company in the world. Apparently, they are now worth and considered on the private company secondary market $1 trillion, and they're going to be doing a $1 trillion IPO in 2027, where the private equity industry gets to keep all the profits, and then the IPO only comes through once it's worth $1 trillion. So they'll keep all the gains, they'll dump it on the stock, and what are things going to look like by 2027? This is a managed asset stripping of the US economy using tariffs and using socialism for the large corporate class. And they're going to be investing that money offshore, overseas, to reset the world order into multipolarity, as we'll be covering more in the geopolitical section. We are going to see 200 years of change in the next 5 years as a result of all of that investment that is happening, and it probably will be a bubble, but there will be major changes that lead to major layoffs at the end of it as well, based upon the data that we're actually starting to see in the real economy right now. So the AI companies are too big to fail. The economy is propped up by them. They all borrowed against their stock. It's propping up the debt markets. They're not going to let the bond market destroy. We are going to get massive fiscal dominance and a larger and larger government, where the profits go back to the large corporate class that control the government as well. So they may need a government bailout, and they will do it because it will be BlackRock that's managing that. BlackRock's Aladdin technology is used by the Federal Reserve, and it's also used by Treasury, and it's also used by all of the major asset managers. So they can push out the data as well while they're managing their ETFs as well. I said BlackRock is the new Dutch East India company that is managing a transition, just like it did for the British Empire, over to the Federal Reserve and the US Empire and the proof of weapons network that was built upon the military industrial complex that is now coming towards the end of a debt cycle. So I wouldn't invest against stocks because they're hedging and all money is pumping into that. But eventually they will carry that on until the last bond can't be sold, and they'll dump it on your pension and they'll dump it on your stable coin. And that's why $1.8 trillion of the debt is now held by Cayman Islands, whose Cayman Islands special purpose vehicles and hedge funds that are dumping it and arbitraging it as well. So I believe that we are in the midst of a generational technological shift, and everybody needs to adjust to that. And that is what artificial intelligence is telling us in both the employment data and some of the economic data, and expect more fiscal dominance, more bigger government, and eventually the government will shutdown will stop only once the corporate class has blackmailed and got all the money of that fiscal dominance, and the destabilization campaign continues as well. Right, so that's everything for part 2. Now in part 3, we're going to be doing this week in geopolitics, and then we're going to be playing an interview. Now you can come back to the interview if you want another time. It's a lot, I know, to cover, but those that really want to stick through, I want to make sure that we play the interview as well. And I'm putting it here because I want it on the podcast, because people are downloading the podcast on both Spotify and Apple iTunes, and then they download it and then they come back and they listen to it in parts. We break this down into smaller videos and blogs. If you need this broken down into chunks, make sure you head over to simondixon.com. We post the different sections over there.
And in case any of this on YouTube gets swiped, we also stream this on X, so follow me on X. Please follow me on Rumble as well. If I get cancelled, we're going to be streaming on Rumble. And I also back it all up in the Bitcoin Hard Talk membership portal. So get yourself a free login. And as a reward, you can get your self-custody course, the 8 modules on how to self-custody your Bitcoin, completely free. I have no sponsorship, no agenda. I got nothing to sell. Bitcoin made me free. I want a bigger community and more of you people free. So let's jump